Welcome back to this now. South Africa will again get an opportunity to host another big global event, the Africa Summit of the World Economic Forum next year in April. Tourism Minister Patricial de Lille believes the event will strengthen the sector. The meeting last took place over 7 years ago in Cape Town before the COVID-19 pandemic. For more on this event and how it will benefit the country, we're joined by international relations expert from the University of Johannesburg, that's Professor Oscar van Heerden. Dr. van Heerden, good to have you on the program this evening. So I mentioned after a 7-year break here, why is the return of the World Economic Forum's Africa Summit so important now? And what has changed in Africa's position in the global economy since 2019?
Good evening, Nhlanhla. You know, I think you would agree and your viewers would agree that because of the changing world order due to President Donald Trump and his administration, and the chaos and anarchy that he has been brought upon the whole world, there is a clear move on the part of the Trump administration to move away from multilateralism. In fact, we are surprised that both him and others from his administration honored the World Economic Forum in Davos this year. Because it's the kind of forums that they don't like. And that's why they also boycotted the G20 in Johannesburg last year. So I think what the World Economic Forum is trying to, a message that they're trying to send is twofold. One, that there is room for multilateralism, and you would agree with me, Nhlanhla. There's a number of people that spoke at Davos, Canadian Prime Minister, President of France, and many others that have emphasized this point. There's room for multilateralism. And two, we need to work and cooperate with the Global South. And that's why I think they decided it's time for it to return to the African continent and to South Africa.
I want us to crystallize that point. This summit is returning during a period of global economic uncertainty and rising geopolitical tensions. So how does Africa then fit into today's changing international power dynamic?
No, I think that just like with the G20 that was hosted by the presidency South Africa in Johannesburg last year, I think if there's any doubt on the minds of any of our fellow brothers and sisters on the continent, President Ramaphosa, Minister Lamola and others really placed Africa front and center. It wasn't just about South Africa, it was about Africa. And I think that they know that even though the hosting itself is going to be managed by South Africa, it's again an opportunity for us to showcase Africa, the free trade agreement that is in place in Africa. And this is really an opportunity for Africa to begin to say, we want to also interact with the global north and talk business.
Yeah. Dr. van Heerden, the World Economic Forum's Africa meetings often promise increased investment and partnerships as well. Based on past experience, have these summits even delivered real benefits for African economies, or have they remained largely symbolic?
Look, I mean, there's a lot of commitments that are made. There's a lot of promises that are made, and not all of them are fulfilled. This is true. But I think that if we go through it with a fine-tooth comb, you'll find that there are a number of countries that actually do benefit with certain projects, infrastructure, technology transfers, and the likes. So I do think that there is a positive coming from the WEF. And the fact that it's coming back to the African continent, what's required this time around is for South Africa yet again to coordinate well in advance with our counterparts on the continent, begin to have a unified message in terms of what is it that we want to do in very much the same way we did with the G20. There were very clear themes around climate cost, around downstreaming of strategic minerals, and so on and so forth. That kind of messaging is going to be important because that's what we're actually going to be able to say. We've got a platform, let's engage with big business and with the global north.
Yeah. Safe to say that Africa holds vast reserves of critical minerals and energy resources as well. To what extent then, Doc, is renewed global interest in Africa driven by, call it genuine developmental partnerships? And how much of it is about strategic competition among major global powers?
Look, you just have to look at what's happening in East Africa. what's happening in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and so forth. The Europeans are acutely aware that even if they want to come with a neo-colonial agenda, those days are over. Africa has opened its eyes. It is putting its demands on the table. It is saying that we are not open for exploitation. We are open for business. And I think the Europeans recognize that. You know, last year, again, I want to make the point that when Donald Trump decided to boycott the G20, I firmly believe that he thought that his allies in Europe, the G7 and so forth, was going to follow suit. But they sent a very clear message to him. We are not in agreement with this. We are coming to South Africa because we need to begin to have business with Africa if we want to survive. Even amidst these false narratives and lies about white genocide, etc., which he repeated in Davos, by the way.
Yeah, going back to a theme that you touched on earlier, South Africa is expected to host the summit again. But what does this say about South Africa's diplomatic influence, but also its economic role on the African continent and in global affairs?
I think it's a clear indication from European leaders, from the rest of the world, that they see the leadership that South Africa can provide and does provide. They see the soft power that South Africa also has on the continent, in the region. As we speak, the National Defence Force is assisting Mozambique with the floods and the problem there, and many other areas. So I think it's a feather in our cap. They recognize that we not only can provide the leadership, but we are also good hosts. Our people are warm, are receiving, and they want to come back. And I think these are all positives that we need to take stock of.
Yeah. Dr. van Heerden, many African countries continue to face high debt levels, currency instability as well, but also issues around slow economic growth. Can international forums like the WEF then realistically influence national policy decisions, or are real decisions made elsewhere?
Look, I mean, I think the WEF needs to have an approach of cooperation. On their own, they won't be able to make a huge difference, but in cooperation with the World Trade Organization, with the IMF and the World Bank, with the new development bank of BRICS, these are the forums, financial institutions, that is supposed to come together to try and see how we can find solutions to the very issues that you've raised around currency, around manipulations, and so on and so forth. So it can be done, but it does need a concerted effort.
Yeah. As we wrap, how central will issues such as regional economic integration, issues around industrialization, but also the African continental free trade area, how important will this be at the summit? And are African countries even aligned on these priorities?
They are not aligned. Let's just be very clear. And I'm saying that if they want to make an impact, if they want to have positive results from the forum, then they need to begin to align. They need to begin to talk to each other. They need to have agreements, and regional cooperation is going to be paramount. You know, we can't, unfortunately, see the continent. The continent is massive. We can't see it as one entity. We have to deal with Southern Africa, East and West and North Africa, but the agenda and the developmental path needs to be agreed upon. We can't be pulling in different directions. I mean, if you look at the microcosm, and I know some people are going to hate me for this, but if you look at the CAF finals between Morocco and Senegal, if that is how we are going to be dealing with our affairs, politically and economically, then we are doomed. We need far greater cooperation and love for each other, and cooperation and working together, and so on. Yes, competition is healthy, but it should not deter us from a common vision in terms of how we take the continent forward.
Well, also interesting is that critics argue that global economic gatherings often prioritize political and business elites over ordinary citizens. So how can the 2027 Africa Summit then ensure broader representation, but also more inclusive outcomes?
Well, I suspect, as usual, South Africa is going to give a nice injection and a dose of reality to the WEF. Yes, we are going to have the global leaders coming together. We're not sure in which city yet. I suspect it won't be Johannesburg nor Cape Town. But I think what we are going to do is parallel structures, which was very, very successful with the G20. We're going to have NPOs, NGOs, and CBOs on the one hand, civil society. We are also going to be engaging with other sectors of society so that they feel that their inputs are valued and that they can make a contribution to the bigger political conversation.
Yeah, and finally, with the intensifying global competition for Africa's resources, what risks should African countries then be most cautious about, especially when negotiating with international investors and partners?
Look, I mean, I think that, the first thing I would want to say is that they can't look at things as if it's black and white. We are being confronted as Africa of wanting to make a choice. It's either you side with me, Trump says, or else. I think what we should do is keep our options open, look at what is our national interests, try and straddle both sides, east and west, to optimize our returns. And we've been doing it fairly well as South Africa over the last few years. So there's no need to change tack. We need to have good relations with Europe. We're trying to have good relations with America. It's going to take time. And we do have good relations with the Far East. That is the model that we need to push forward.
Dr. Oscar van Heerden, thank you so much for your time. Of course, as global interest in Africa grows, critical questions do remain about who truly benefits, how power and partnerships are negotiated, and whether high-level discussions like this lead to meaningful improvements, especially for lives of ordinary citizens on the African continent. A big thanks to Dr. Oscar van Heerden. He's an international relations expert, also helping us unpack what this development means for South Africa, the African continent, and Africa's role in a rapidly evolving global order as well.